Well, welcome everybody. This is Debbie Meaver with National Kitchen and Bath Association. You're here for our first webinar for January 2020 on business and marketing. Today's session is called Staying in Front of Your Customers in a Digital Environment with Jim Nowakowski. He's the president and owner of Interline Group. And Jim, if you're there, we're ready to get started, please.
Yes, I'm here, Debbie, and if you're ready to go, I'm ready to go. Shall we go?
Yes, we shall go. Thank you.
Good. Happy New Year. Thank you, Debbie. Happy New Year, everybody, and so glad to kick off this NKBA series. We love presenting to designers, and I see we have cabinetry people, architects, manufacturers. Thank you for sharing those broad brush strokes. We're excited to be here today with you on this wonderful, actually it's raining in Palatine. Illinois, where I'm at. This is copyrighted material, but as Debbie mentioned, it will be recorded and sent to you as a broadcast. You can also, I'll give you some information if you need the slide deck at the end of that. I'll be happy to give it to you. You will get credit for this, as Debbie mentioned earlier in the introduction, and everything should be fine and dandy to go. So at the end of this course, we're going to review business basics and how digital is interrupting everything you do. It's interrupting it. And we're going to determine and help you determine your value proposition, which is the most important thing to understand in a disrupted environment. Talk a little bit about differentiation. And then the second half of the course is about reviewing the tactics you need to put your differentiation in front of your customers. I like to start out with a story. I always like to start out with a story. This is a Rorschach test. If you know what Rorschach is, they used to do ink blots, but this is my version of the Rorschach test. And I show this to people when they come into my office, either as a hiree, we're hiring someone, and I say, what do you see? So we had an intern over the holidays, a young lady going to college, and I said, what do you see? And as a Rorschach advocate, you understand that there are no right or wrong answers, that Rorschach tests are designed to bring out personality traits, correct? And so it's the same thing with a story. And most people, when they see this, they basically say, well, I see a wedding. I see some people at a wedding having a drink, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You know, they look like they're laughing. And then I probe. I say, well, what are they talking about? Inevitably, most people look at this poster and they see the guy on the left and they say, that looks like Robert Redford. But Tiffany, who was our intern at the time, didn't say that. She just glossed over that for whatever reason. And so I finally, at the end of our 5 minutes looking at this poster and telling stories, I said, does the guy look like Robert Redford? And she goes, who's Robert Redford? And the minute she said that, I realized, oh my gosh, either something has happened to me in terms of age or something has happened when she didn't know Robert Redford. Now, the next day, because Tiffany carried her phone around with, her all the time, she basically said that, I think I would be interested in seeing Jeremiah Johnson, one of Redford's movies. So I learned that millennials and young people use the phone, but that one of the things this taught me and that I want to share with you is the idea of perceptions and communication. Now, if you Google Robert Redford Rorschach, this blog that I wrote about this story is #1, and we're going to talk about why that's important. And the first thing you have to realize, and if you're going to talk about and find your value, is that you live in an exabyte world. You live in a digital world. There's a thing, I like to say 667 exabytes, but there's enormous amounts of information. You cannot possibly keep up. So you might as well just give up right now or make some decisions on what you're going to do in a digital world in order to convey your value. Because we're going to talk about that in the first part of this, is really your value. By the way, please put your questions into the chat box. Debbie will collect them and we'll answer them. I'm going to pause in between the first and the second part. And so if you have questions, I'll take a couple at that time. What I want you to ask yourself is really, what are you selling? Now, I mentioned earlier, we have some cabinet people, we have design firms, we have designers, some showroom people. We have a lot of different people in the audience, right? And you all think you're selling something, but what are you really selling? Most people think, well, I'm selling design services. Well, okay, if I've got 50 designers in the audience, You're all selling design services. How does a purchaser of design services differentiate? How do you sell what you're selling? There's a big article that we just read by the Luxury Institute that talks about the disruption going on in the luxury marketplace. As disruption, and it's all because of the digital world, ladies and gentlemen. It's all because of the digital world that disruption takes place. Because you have brands out there being all of a sudden an upstart brand, what we call interloper brands, come in out of nowhere and start taking away your market share. So how you sell what you're selling is very important. And who buys what you're selling? Why do they buy it? Ladies and gentlemen, you can't possibly answer all these questions today, but you have to think about these. These are the questions that you must formulate in your mind if you're going to compete successfully in a digital world. Look at the last question. Does anyone else sell what you are selling? All you have to do is Google what you think you're selling, and you'll get millions of pages of people who are selling it too. Truly, we are, in a digital world which is totally disrupted. One of my favorite ads that they don't run anymore was what they call the old man in the chair. Now, if you're familiar with the name McGraw-Hill, McGraw-Hill was a big publisher. They're still around, but they don't publish as much as they used to. And whenever there was a recession, they would run this ad in print magazines because most people during a recession, what do? They stop advertising, which is it's the worst thing you possibly can do in a recession. We're going to talk about that a little later. But the worst thing you could do is go into your shell when there's a recession. You have to be bold. You have to take risks. It's easy for me to say, but I can give you specific examples. They would run this ad. Now, if you look at that, the rumor has it that this was the most friendly guy in the world. But if you look at him, he doesn't look so friendly. He was in the chair and he was asking you these questions. Think about this. I don't know who you are. I don't know your company. I don't know your company's product. I don't know what you stand for, your company's customers, your record, your reputation. So what do you want to sell me? In other words, the moral of the story on the bottom, if you can read it, sales start before the salesman calls with print advertising. Now, digital, right? The internet has totally disrupted print advertising. We can talk about that. But the point of the old man in the chair is still relevant. It starts before the sales call. I'm going to give you a statistic now. I want you to write this down. 70% of the people who are looking to buy what you're selling go to Google first. I'm going to repeat that. 70% of people who are looking to buy, I don't care what you're selling, but 70% of the people who are trying to buy what you're selling, they go to Google first. That's how disruptive you are, which is why it's no longer the old man in the chair. It's the phone in your pocket, in your purse, in your bag, whatever. It's the mobile, it's digital. Your website, I'm going to say this more than once, is your most important marketing tool. Your website. Why? Because if 70% of people who buy what you're selling go to Google first and you're not on page one, not in the running. You're just not in the running. So as we discuss your value, as we probe for your value, what differentiates you from other people in the audience? How many customers do you have? When I give this presentation in person, inevitably somebody, and I'm sure somebody in the audience is saying this under the breath now, but Debbie has all you on mute, so I can't hear you. Somebody inevitably says, not enough, Jim. Of course you don't have enough, but you got to be careful of that answer. Because if you're a four-man firm and you're handling, let's say, 15 projects, and suddenly you get 5 more projects, guess what's going to happen? You're going to stress your internal people, right? And you're going to lose some customers. So the answer to the first question, how many customers do you have? You can't say as many as I can get. You have to think about this. Because the second question, how many do you want? And the third, how many can you handle, are very important. You can't handle everybody. And in the digital world, ladies and gentlemen, there's billions of people. You have a potential for billions of people. Well, wait a minute, Jim. I don't believe that for 1 minute. I don't believe that I can get, if I'm working out of Connecticut, I don't believe anybody in California would ever hire me. guess again. Ladies and gentlemen, you may not want to admit it. You might want to say, wow, Jim, I just want to stay in my neighborhood. The minute you enter the digital environment, you have the potential to be hired by anybody. That's what's exciting about this. So you have to have long and you have to have short-term goals. You have to do that. You have to sit down and write these out. I've got 20 customers now. When I started Interline Creative Group, I said I'm going to grow the business to 25 people. And guess what? It took 10 years to do that, but that's exactly what I did. You have to write these things down because unless you write them down, they become fleeting. They escape your mind. And let's pretend for a moment that you're a customer. You're sitting at dinner, the phone rings, and it's a telemarketer or it's a robot call. You know, I was coming into work today and I'm listening to the phone and they're advertising a service. I think they're called Ruby answering services. And it started out like this. It was a beautiful voice. Do you remember the time when a human being would answer the phone? You know, it was like that, right? Interline has a policy and has had a policy for 25, 30 years is that we answer the phone in two rings. We answer the phone in two rings. There's no such thing as automated attendant except after hours, right? But they're offering services now because if you're a customer, how many times have you been frustrated by going through the prompts of going through and trying to talk to a human being? So if you want to differentiate your business, immediately start answering the damn phone. I'm serious, ladies and gentlemen. How often are you contacted by you? How often do people probe you? You know, we're getting into the election year. I'm not going to be political, but guess what? Guess what happens, right? The phone starts ringing and they're doing polling and they're doing donations and they're doing, right? But there's services also, if you realize this, that you can shut all those robots off. There's actually services for that. So you got to be careful too, right? You don't want to be construed as a robot. How often are you contacted by people? The amount of frequency that you contact your customers is very important. And what do you contact them with? Your value proposition. What's your value proposition to people? What are you offering them? Inevitably, when I do this online, I was doing this one time last year in Kansas City, and there were some 4 or 5 designers in the background when I was doing this presentation, this exact presentation. And I came to this slide, and they started giggling, and I said, "What are you giggling about?" And he goes, "We were just talking about this, that we think as designers that it's all about us and our designs and everything else, and we couldn't be." And this is so true. It's not about us. It's about them. When you make that point of view shift, when you stop thinking, "Well, I'm the greatest architect in the world," right? Who isn't? Who is not in the audience the greatest at what you do? Of course you are. But it's not about you. It's about them. It's about what people want and giving people what they want. Your value is what your customer perceives. Your value is they perceive it as worth something. In fact, ladies and gentlemen, I'm gonna offer this piece of advice. They do business with you, and it's often because of something intangible. You've lost clients, you've gained clients. We're going to talk about that. I have a whole course on that. People want to deal with people. You can. I have clients now who think, ladies and gentlemen, that you can automate response, that you can automate lead generation, that you can automate everything. Ladies and gentlemen, how do you automate a relationship? You can't do it. It's that simple. You cannot automate a relationship, nor can you automate a business relationship. You can't do it. So unlike features, functions, benefits, value, what people perceive in you as valuable is intangible. It's the feeling. This is where I break out to the song, ladies and gentlemen. I'm kidding. I don't think the podcast could stand it. Let's take a security light, right? It's got a range, it's got an adjustment, it goes whatever, right? It goes on when people walk by. That's great. But what's it really selling, that security light? It's not selling its range, it's not selling how it operates, it's not selling its adjustability, it's selling security. Have you ever touched security? You have felt insecure. Sometimes we all feel insecure, right? Even now, right? But You cannot touch security, just like it's very difficult to touch your value. Let's take air, right? Something air. Air is necessary, but it has absolutely no value unless you take it away. This is the part of the presentation where I asked Debbie to flip the switch. Now, you didn't know this, but we have the technology that's going to suck the air out of the rooms that you're sitting in right now. So be prepared now, because when I tell Debbie to flip that switch, it's going to suck the air from all of your rooms, and I'm going to ask you for $10 to get the air back. You ready, Debbie? Debbie's not. Debbie's just listening, and she's probably laughing now because there is no switch, right? Well, what if there was? You know, air has absolutely, like I said, no value until you can't get it anymore. And the minute you can't get it, it's value, right? Ladies and gentlemen, that's the definition of a commodity. What the digital environment has done, it has taken all of your services. I mean, every one of your services, my services, your products, and commoditized them. And that's the worst thing it could do. But within the commodity world is opportunity, because that's how you got to separate yourselves. That's what value has to be. That's what value has to do. What makes you unique? You have to. You're not going to answer all these questions today. You're not going to answer them in the next 5 minutes. These are profound questions that you have to think about, because the answers are not readily apparent. And yet, I'm going to give you a hint. They're within you. Because, ladies and gentlemen, there's a lot of people in the audience today, all unique. You're all unique. It's like fingerprints. You may, well, Jim, if there's 20 architects, an architect is an architect. I was meeting with an architect the other day, and he says, I don't know what we're gonna talk about. I just do schools. I said, well, let's talk about that. Tell me what you do with the schools. How do you approach the projects? Blah, blah, blah. At the end of an hour, he realized he's not only different than other architects, he found some of the value that he couldn't find anywhere else that he brings to the projects when he's designing a school. That's what you're looking for. You're looking for what makes you unique, what you're doing that your competitors aren't doing. Well, Jim, we're designers. We're not really competitors. We like to share information on Instagram. That's great. But you know what? If you have a client that only has $10 and he's got to spend those $10 somewhere with some designer, are you going to share that because you love your competitors? Are you going to want that $10 to support your staff? You see what I'm saying? There's nothing wrong with learning from your competitors or being frenemies or whatever you want to call it. But you have to understand that you're in competition. You're in competition in order to deliver your product and make money. There, I said it. Okay? I'm sorry. It's about the money, ladies and gentlemen. So what do your customers like? Why do they like you? Have you ever asked that about customers? One of my most famous blogs out there now is seven things to ask when you lose a pitch. I've had over 2,000 people read this since I posted it, last year. 2,000 people, and that's the ones I can track. I can't track everybody. 7 things to ask when you lose a pitch. You have to ask your customers why they do business with you, and why you lose accounts and why you gain accounts. We just won a project the other day, major website, right? And I asked the client, we were competing with 2 huge companies, much bigger than we are. And yet we were awarded the project. And when I got the project, I says, well, why did you award us the project? He says, well, first of all, I thought we could learn something from you. You know how important that is, what that comment did for us? I said, but that can't be the only reason. He says, no, you talked about something the other 2 didn't. I'm going to repeat that. You talked about something the other 2 didn't. What do you call that? That's called differentiation, right? You want to differentiate yourself. And when I said, what did I talk about? He said, SEO, search engine optimization. Ladies and gentlemen, if you know anything about websites and you don't talk about SEO, what the hell are you talking about? You can't do it. It's impossible. You have to talk about SEO. So I felt bad. I wanted the account just for talking about what I should be talking about. But unless I asked the client, my now client, I would have never known. So you have to do that, and you have to understand that your value, why people value you, is in their perception of you. And perceptions are very difficult to deal with, right? They're words. How do you deal with words? Food. Have you ever been really hungry? I mean, really hungry. There's a great, Hombre was a Paul Newman movie. It's a Western. It's about a guy who was stealing money from the Indian reservation and going with it. And they were in the stagecoach, right? And it's Paul Newman and the crooked Indian agent and his wife. And the wife starts talking about the Indian reservation and how, they're very stunning when they walk around the Indian reservation, right? But she said, but they eat dogs. And Paul Newman is just sitting there now. They don't know he lived on the Indian reservation. It's a long story, but he's just listening to him talk. And she says, "Oh, they're stunning, but they eat dogs." And she said, "Oh, they eat dogs." And Paul Newman, he's a great actor, was a great actor. He looks at her and he goes, "Have you ever been hungry?" And she looked at him and like what? She says, "I don't care how hungry I was, I would never eat a dog." And he looked at her without blinking and without saying anything. He says, "Lady, you would eat the dog and you would fight for the bones." Ladies and gentlemen, that's what we're talking about. Hunger. If you, I feel like a burger. That's not what we're talking about. If you're ever hungry, any food will do. But if you're really hungry, boy, that's a big difference. And that's the perception you're trying to shape with people. Here's where you want to be. This is a very profound statement. Take away a brand and people will find the replacement. If you take away value, people will protest. Well, Jim, are you saying that all brands are worthless? No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that Coke or Pepsi. Let's say I love Coca-Cola, right? And I go to a restaurant that doesn't serve Coke. Will you drink a Pepsi? How many people will drink a Pepsi? You see, brands are important. Brands are how you delineate your companies from other companies. But if you're just talking about building your brand, you're missing the point. It's about your value. It's about what people take that's intangible away. But they take it away with them, which is really part of you, isn't it? Take away value and people protest. You can't do that. Don't take away the value. Your value comes from your differentiation. It comes from doing things that are different than other people. Having design, well, Jim, all designs are different. Yeah. Have you ever gone on House? I don't want to talk about House, but have you ever gone to House, right? And just put in kitchens or bathroom designs or whatever, fabric, whatever. Put anything in there. And you get zillions of pictures, right? Start looking at those, and after 5 minutes, they start looking alike. Seriously. And you know this. Not only that, you start putting things out there, you don't know who's looking at them. Somebody might be looking at them and taking your intellectual property. We could talk about that. But that's what you have to do. You have to show them something unique. For example, Google they don't read Flash. They don't read pictures. So if you just post pictures, guess what? Google doesn't know what they are. You have to put a caption in them. You have to put words behind your pictures, in your pictures. Understand? How do you differentiate? What kind of services? Where do you sell your stuff? Are you working out of your house? Do you work in a beautiful downtown building? Does people walk in and say, "Oh, this is what I'm paying for"? You see, your offices create an impression. How you answer the phone creates an impression. It creates the value, the feeling that people have. You understand? So value comes from differentiation. You all look alike, but in a world of all lookalikes, how do you stand out? How do you stand out? Don't just add value, which means giving something more to the individual services you sell. That's okay. What you really want is value added. Example, I'm going to give a process example, right? some pumps that are out there. So I had a pump manufacturer who's going around and he's trying to sell his pumps. I took pumps because I don't think I have a pump manufacturer in the audience, but it relates to everything you do. And I'll put it in your terms if you want. But he's a pump manufacturer. He's got a major client who has his pumps and has his competitor pumps. So he goes into the client's office and he does a mean time between failure study. You know what that is, an MTBF? It's a mean time between failures. So they measure the pump and they measure when it fails and they take a mean time between failures so they could do predictive maintenance. Because on some of these pumps, if they fail, guess what happens? The whole process goes down and you're talking millions of dollars. So they do not want these pumps to fail. So he goes in and he does a study on all his pumps and he's out for bid to build the new, they were doing a new, retrofit. They were expanding the plant. And he presents to the client the study that he did, the mean time between failure study, along with all the information about his pumps. He wasn't asked to do that. It wasn't part of the proposal. He just did it. And the client said to him, "This is unbelievable." He says, "What can you tell me about the competitive pumps I have?" And he said, I can't tell you what they are. I can certainly try, I can run this analysis for you, but I didn't do that because I'm only worried about my pumps for you. He says, "Would you do it for the competitive pumps?" He says, "Absolutely." He got the project. He got the retrofit. They pulled out all the competitors' pumps, put his pumps in, and that's the moral of the story. When you do things beyond what you're asked to do, that's value added. You're adding value, and you will never go wrong with that. "Well, Jim, I added that and I didn't get the project." You didn't get the project, but you gained something. You gained an understanding that you can use in the next project and the next project and the next project. And with respect, ladies and gentlemen, you made an impression on that client because you went beyond the call of duty. When you do that, you create a perception. You create a perception that you want to help them. It's not about you. It's about them. We're doing good on time. Here's the problem. Here's the bottom line on value. You are in a terribly competitive world. Look at some of these statistics. The rise of social media. That's the bottom chart on the right. It's a little over 10 years old, but everybody's on this, right? Well, Jim, what are you saying? That I have to become a social media maven? No, absolutely not. But you have to understand how people communicate, just like Tiffany did, right? In the Rorschach test and Robert Redford, you have to find a common language. Language is so important. I do design services. What the heck does that mean? Right? Right? Just look at some of the websites out. Go to some of your competitors and look at their value that they're trying to project. Right? It's an amazing thing when you start studying this and trying to figure out your differentiation. So your strategies, your product services. Well, I have an exclusive product. Is there such a thing as an exclusive product anymore? You know Wayfair, right? Wayfair competes with Home Depot, with all these other people, right? Everybody's in it. Oh my God. Amazon, look at Amazon. People have a death fear. They have a fear of Amazon, but Amazon doesn't have what some of you have, which is that insight into the client intellect, into what the client wants. Amazon is just a big distributor. That's it. Of course, they're into the cloud now and other things, but that's what you really want to understand about your business. Your business is not about what you're selling. It's about what you're selling around what you're selling. It's being there when your clients need you. It's very important. Very important. Take away the brand, people will find a replacement. Take away value, people will protest. What's value? There's a great book called The Art of the Sale where a British guy studied the best salespeople in the world and he wrote a book. I recommend it, The Art of the Sale. There's a story about a remodeler, on the East Coast who would run 20 miles in the morning. I think it was 20 miles. And so this British guy, the only way he could talk to him would be to go jogging in the morning with this guy. And he had a nickname. The remodeler had a nickname, and the nickname was Cockroach. And so the British guy finally got enough nerve to say, "Why do they call you Cockroach?" He says, "Because when you get me into your house, you can't get me out. I will always find another project." Isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting, right? Of course, we don't want to be cockroaches. Franz Kafka wrote a book called The Metamorphosis, which I don't want to get into. And that's the end of the first line. So find your value. And remember, you have to convey that value digitally, which we're going to talk about in the second half. I'm going to pause now, take a sip of coffee. You can see I need it, right, ladies and gentlemen? Debbie, do we have any questions?
Hi, Jim. Let's see. So there was a comment here, and I thought this was interesting. So we don't sell, we teach using content. That was a comment from someone in the audience, and I find that interesting. Do you have anything that you want to say to that?
Give that person a hug and tell her to contact me and I'll give her a Starbucks card. That's perfect because you actually teach using content. And as a former educator, my background is teaching sophomores in high school for 10 years before I had a run-in with the administration. I've been fired several times. You really want to do that because teaching shows them that you have knowledge, and you also, that's how you differentiate. When you're not afraid to teach people, you know, so they teach you in sales 103 or whatever it is, you should never admit to the client that I don't know. That's the first thing I like to admit to a client, that I don't know, but I'll find out. Although you accumulate over the years knowledge, I'm betting you whoever said that comment, Debbie, probably is a designer and knows an awful lot. And by knowing an awful lot, what you do is you have a portfolio of ideas to draw from, as opposed to the newbie, as opposed to Tiffany. She didn't know who Robert Redford was, but if she see a couple of movies, she can now relate to it. And it's the same. Robert Redford is just an idea, right? It's a guy, of course, but it's an idea. It's the same thing in design. It's like, what's the latest color? Well, it's white again, isn't it? And there's cycles of color that happen every year. You're right. That's a great comment. Very good comment.
Okay, here's another one. So the person is asking, what is the name of the book, The Art of Selling? They want to know the author.
The art of the sale, and I will get you the author because I'll have somebody run into the next room and grab it. How's that?
Okay, and then someone's asking if you could just for a second go back to the value slide, the one before the apples.
This one?
I think the one, yeah, I think so. Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
And by the way, I will make the slides again available. You can contact Debbie or just email. I'll give you my email. You just ask me for them. But this is really your differentiation comes from looking at your business carefully and then comparing it to other businesses and how they do it. And then you really worry about how you sell that. Your website being now here, the art of the sale is by a guy named Philip Delves Brighton, Broughton. The Art of the Sale. It's an excellent book. Um, one of many excellent books. I mean, there's no substitute for reading, but there is no substitute for experience because experience comes from living that. And you know what? The best experience is actually making a mistake, right? I mean, I can't. Mistakes teach you faster than anything, especially in the design business, don't they? Okay. Can I proceed?
Yes, you may. Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, if you have more questions, keep them coming. Now, the second part of this presentation, once you uncover your value, is presenting that value to your customers and clients and prospects, right? And here's the tactics. There are no more tactics than what you see here. There's advertising, there's phone, there's internet, there's PR, broadcast service. Now, advertising, I fold in social media in there on the internet and advertising has a bad rap, which we'll talk about in a moment too, because advertising is on the, you have ad blockers now, right? So if you who among you loves advertising, right? I love advertising, but I have an ad blocker called Ghostry, Ghostery, which is it's the ad blocker of ad blockers. It's free software. Put it on your browser and never see another ad in your life. But it's very powerful. It stops you from online banking too, so you have to know how to turn it off. Let's look at advertising. Newsletters. Newsletters are important to your maintaining your client base and promoting to them. And some people do it in print, and some people do it digitally, and some people do it both. But why are newsletters important? Because they're your communication. It's your newsletter. You're not buying anybody else's space. It's your newsletter going to your prospects and your customers. And if you're going to do it, you should do it on a regular basis, not every hour. I'm kidding. Maybe every quarter. Depends on your client list. But you want to tell people about what you do. Why? Most people don't know what you do. Oh, wait a minute, Jim. They hired me. They're my client. Let me repeat that. Most people, including your clients, don't know all you do. They don't know all you do. We had a prospect in here the other day, major company, right? $20,000 research project. We're sitting there, and I said, "Is there anything else I can tell you in order to get this project? Because you always got to be closing, ladies and gentlemen." And he says, "No." He says, "Everything that I wanted to know, I found it on your website." He said, "In fact, here's the kicker. I didn't know companies like yours existed until I saw your website." Do you know how proud that made me feel? Do you know how excited I got? Because that's really what you want to do. You're doing differentiation, you're communicating, and that's what newsletters do. Because, ladies and gentlemen, they don't know what you do. I would argue some of you don't know what you do. Well, what are you talking about? Of course I know what I do. No, you don't, because you never sit, you're too busy executing. I was at breakfast with a major publisher yesterday. He's got 32 media outlets. He's an unbelievably successful guy, right? You know what he told me? He says, "Jim, I just don't have the time to sit down and do strategy anymore." This is a top level. This is the guy. He's the owner. He's the top guy, right? "I don't have time to do strategy anymore. All I'm doing is executing." And you know what? I felt sorry for him because you know why? That's doomsday. There's a doomsday waiting for him because you have to do strategy, just like a newsletter. If you're going to do a newsletter, do it the right way and do it always. Be consistent. And remember, the list is the most important. Do programs, right? Most of the designers and architects and showrooms in the world out there that are in my audience, right? You have wonderful manufacturers who want to do things for you. If you call up one of your major manufacturers, I don't care who it is, and you say, I have a mailing list of 200 people. Let's just make that up for a moment. And I want to mail them a sample of your product. Right? Do you have product samples of the textures or of the colors, or you have colored chips? Whatever. Would you give me 200 sets to mail to my customers? Ladies and gentlemen, you would not only get them in the mail, Federal Express to you the next day, and if the manufacturer you're talking to says, "I can't do that," go to the competitor and he'll be glad to do it. These people want the people on your client list. Should I repeat that? The people on your client list are your assets, and the manufacturers you represent, you specify, they want access to that list. Well, help them, but let it come through you. Should you do a digital ad? I don't know. I don't think so. Your website is your ad. Should I repeat that too? Your website is your advertisement. If 70% of people are going to Google first and your website comes on page one, that's your ad. People will click on it and there they are. They're yours to lose or to gain. Should you use newspapers or magazines? I don't know anymore. I don't think so. Depends. If you're in an upscale, suburb, like Barrington, Illinois is an upscale suburb, they publish their own magazine. Maybe it's worth a shot. So you talk to the rep. I'm going to show you a chart in a moment that's very important. Who's the customer base that the magazine reach? Well, what about radio, Jim? We'll talk about that. What about radio? It depends who's listening. Who has time to listen anymore, right? And talk to your customers. Talk to your customers. Ask your customers what they read nowadays. Well, what about a Facebook campaign, Jim? What about it? I don't think so. I still remember when Facebook was invented, right? And Facebook says, we'll never accept advertising. They were going to be strictly communication, right? Yeah, right. Of course not. That's how they make their money. Do flyers, collaborate with other companies, do a letter. Jim, nobody reads letters anymore. You know why? Because nobody mails letters anymore. I write letters. I wrote, okay, maybe I shouldn't even mention who I wrote this to. It's a major, major, major company, right? I wrote the top CIO guy a letter. I called him up and he's on the phone and he said, "I got your letter. What do you want?" I'm serious. I'm serious. This is a big consulting company. Big consulting company. I spent 5 minutes on the phone with them. I linked into them. We're networked. We're connected now. I wrote a letter. Nobody writes letters. You want to differentiate? Write a letter, right? This is the chart I was telling you about. Very important. In any communication you do, when we're talking about advertising or the next one, right? There's an overall audience. All right. If you go on Facebook, your overall audience is 1 billion people. I'm serious. You can't talk to 1 billion people, but that's the overall audience. If you advertise in a magazine in an affluent suburb, it's going to go to certain zip codes and certain people. It's not going to go to the entire Barrington, Illinois. It's going to go to certain zip codes in there. They've already filtered it, right? Once you run whatever you're running, your communication, advertising, PR, a certain amount of people will see it, a certain amount of people will read it, and a certain amount of people will raise their hand. And then within that inquiry circle, a certain amount of people will buy your service or your product or whatever, right? This is the most important visual you can have on your buying anything. So if you get someone approaching you and saying, hey, boy, look at this. I can reach so and so with so much money and blah, 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 blah. Your answer is prove it. Because even if you run in there, I can guarantee you not everybody will see your communication. How do I know that? Starch IRS Hooper is one of the leading research companies in the world, right? And they used to measure this stuff. The highest seeing score ad I ever saw was in Business Week when it was published. It was 99% of the million people who read Business Week saw this ad. The ad, when you opened it up, was one of those pop-ups. You remember those pop-up books you bought when you were a little kid and you open it up and it popped out? This was a Honeywell ad. It ran in Business Week. The guy opened up Business Week and the city popped up and talked about how Honeywell controls, the climates of all the buildings in the city, blah, blah, blah. But it was a pop-up. 99% of a million people saw that. Startling statistic, isn't it? What happened to the 1% that didn't? What do you mean, Jim? Well, I'm just telling you, if it's 99%, that means 1% missed the pop-up. How the heck do you miss a pop-up? You know how, right? You don't open the magazine. Not everybody sees your messages. Remember when I told you not everybody knows what you do? Time is the currency, ladies and gentlemen. Nobody has the time to know everything. So you got to keep hitting them, keep pounding them. This is a zip code of where we were talking about. Interline lives in 60067. And I can tell you when you study your zip codes of your customer file, that your zip codes will look like this. They will not all come from the same zip code. But Jim, what if they do? Well, that tells you something, doesn't it? It tells you that that's where you probably should be prospecting. Because the more people who buy your services in the same zip code, you're not reaching the entire zip code. So that's maybe where you want to prospect. You see what I'm saying? You want to look at these things and think about these things. It's very important. So here's some tips. Try something bold. Redefine advertising. Don't think, well, it's a digital ad. It doesn't have to be that. I remember presenting to a major architectural firm in downtown Chicago, and we were talking billboards, and they had 25 architects. This is a major national architectural company, right? And I'm presenting to them, and I come to the point where I talk about billboards, and they go, "We would never use billboards because we're architects." I said, "Really?" I said, so when I was coming into the Ohio overpass into Chicago, and this magnificent building is rising from the ground, the steel structure, right? Rising from the ground. And there's this huge billboard that you cannot miss. You just glance at it and you see McHugh Construction. And in the corner, you see the name of the architectural firm, which happens to be the one I was presenting to. And you see McHugh, but you don't see that architect because he's too small. I said, so billboards don't work? Isn't that your building that I just looked at? You designed it. They're just building it. Not that there's anything wrong with just being a builder. Ladies and gentlemen, I sparked a conversation that's probably still going on. Well, maybe we should be buying billboards. That's not what I was saying. I was saying do something different. Try something different. Talk to people. I have a client that sells men's grooming products, right? I'm in the show, the actual waiting room for my vehicle to be serviced, and this guy walks in with a huge beard, right? And I talked to him for 10 minutes about what kind of grooming products he uses for his beard. We had a wonderful conversation. A wonderful guy. Do something different. Participate. Ask questions. Half of your brain responds to visuals. You must use visuals. You must differentiate yourself. So don't just ready, fire, aim, fire again. This is the ready, aim, fire. You already missed the boat. Ready, fire, aim, fire again. Keep it moving. There's a blog on my website, The Truth About Native Advertising. I encourage you to read it. The phone is the most overlooked tactic you can possibly have in your arsenal for putting your value in front of your customers. Well, wait a minute, Jim. Didn't you just say that calling people is obnoxious? No, I didn't say that. Is that what you heard? I'm shocked. That's not what you heard. Your phone. I I go, we all have interesting situations. So I have 18 people left out of 25 because many retired, right? So I go around, I say, did you talk to the client? They said, yes, I emailed them. I said, no, no, no. Did you call them up? No, I emailed them. Sometimes it's so difficult to talk to people. Don't be afraid of the phone. Pick up the damn phone. Pick it up. Call people. Well, Jim, they'll hang up on me. You know what? That's okay. When people hang up on me, I call them back and say, I think we were disconnected. They laugh or they hang up again. Use the phone. Don't be obnoxious. I'm not saying to be obnoxious, but after the sale, call them up. Say, why did you buy it? What did you find out? How was that faucet I recommended and specified? What are you doing? Cold calling, doing research is unbelievable. And ladies and gentlemen, most people you call want to help you. If you ask them a question and you have a sincere need to understand and learn, just like the person's comment was, they're going to talk to you. They're going to talk to you. Well, Jim, didn't you just say people are busy? Of course they are. So you have tactics. You leave voicemails. You leave interesting voicemails, not, hi, this is Jim Nowakowski. I'm trying. Leave interesting voicemails. Look I've called you 5 times already. I don't want to bother you, but I just got to know this. Can you help me? Periodic quarterly to your customers just to check in. When's the last time you talked to the customer? Seriously, take your customer file, put it up there in Excel, sort it by the last contact date you had with your customer. Call the bottom of the pile. Call the bottom. We used to add, when I was selling direct mail, when I was in the direct agency in my mail business, we used to have a tactic. We would walk in to a client and we'd say, give me your dead list. And they would say, what are you talking about? I'd say, we want your dead list. He goes, what's that? Well, that's the list of people you haven't called in a while, the dead file, right? They said, what are you going to do with it? I said, I'm going to bring it back to life. Well, how are you going to do that? I said, I'm going to call them. It inevitably works. Well, Jim, some of those phones are disconnected. Of course they are. Of course they are. But that doesn't mean anything. Some of them are not disconnected. They actually will answer the phone. We did a direct mail piece for a guy, and then we started, calling him. It's a long story. I don't want to get into it because I'll run out of time. But basically, these people haven't heard from the guy in a year. They were waiting to be called. They were waiting to buy something. The codes change. You know what's going on in California, right? With the privacy codes. That changes everything. Do you have your privacy statements? Do your clients know that you respect their privacy? This is very important. And there's secrets of cold calling. You got to have something to say. You can't just say, hey, hire me. I'm good. That ain't going to work. You got to have something of value to show people. So here's some tips. Call a radio program. You all have radio programs in your cities, right? Especially on Saturday mornings. That's when the remodelers guys gets on and they talk about renovation, right? And you're listening to those radio programs, right? and you hear something that's obviously wrong. What do? You swear at the radio? Pick up the phone. Pull over. Don't get into an accident. Pick up the phone and call them. You know, some of my most famous calls have been I've been hung up by great people because I challenge them on the radio. I hear them talking on the radio. I get through suddenly and I challenge them and they hang up on me. This is great. I could talk about that some other time. Respond to something. You see an article in the newspaper, right? Respond to it. Write the editor saying, I saw this and this is what I think you should do. Paint a picture with your voice. When you're on the phone, what do you think? Ladies and gentlemen, here's a polling question. No, I'm kidding. What do you think I'm doing? You think I'm sitting in my chair talking to you now? I'm all over my office. In fact, people are looking at me, is he doing another webinar? Because your voice paints a picture. People, I had a major, this is a true story. I was writing, a major client's wife passed away. I'm helping to write his the wife's obituary with him in his office. The phone rings, he picks it up. This is the president of the company, major multi-million-dollar company, right? I'm sitting in his office, he picks it up. Here's his voice. Yeah, yeah, no, yeah, no, I can't talk about that now. And he hangs up. Ladies and gentlemen, after the first, yeah, the caller should have realized something is going on. Something is going on. I mean, you got to be an idiot not to know something's going on when people do that. I will venture a guess that you can all tell when you're calling a client, a prospect, or a customer that they're doing something else. You can sense it, that they're not listening to you. You know, listening is an art, isn't it? And you have to force yourself sometimes to stop what you're doing to listen to people. And your voice paints the picture. Your voice is one of the great God-given things you can have to communicate to people and call people back no matter what. And there's a blog, why doesn't the sales force follow up on leads? Now that's the biggest problem, following up on leads. The internet. Gotta watch my time. Okay, we're gonna whip through this. SEO, we already talked about this. Email basics. Your website is very, very important. It's the most important thing you can do. Send your newsletter. Put your newsletter on your website. Put a blog on your website. Google loves content. Did I repeat that? Google loves content. You cannot have enough content. What do you mean, Jim? I thought I read something that a post should be 300 or 400 words max. Yeah. But guess what? Google reads everything. Google reads everything. How do you implement SEO? There's another blog on my website. Do social media often. Do a video. This is a video climate. There are people making fantastic amounts of money on YouTube for a while, and then they fade away. You need video to inspire people. And inspire people on your website. Bring them to your website. But make sure it's mobile. PR. Sponsor a school event, right? Go to, what it means to be an architect. I want to talk on my kids', day at school. What my dad does for a living, what my mom does for a living. Get involved with the community. Teach people. Show people you care, right? Go to speak at conferences. This is wonderful. I'm going to KBIS. If you're going to be at KBIS, stop in and see me, January 22nd, 3 o'clock. Selling the why and why it ain't so, right? Simon Sinek. Do something for the community. Join an organization. Never send anything anything without a picture. You always need visuals. And deal with the crisis first. And by the way, if you Google selling the why, and if you look, Interline Group is the third post. You see it there? That's SEO. Selling the why is Simon Sinek. He started this years ago. I encourage you to read that blog because selling the why is partly selling your differentiation, but it doesn't always work like that anymore. Broadcast. Be careful of television. It's very expensive. Radio, be careful of radio. It's very expensive. You want to control your expense. Do a podcast instead. Put podcasts up, right? Put them on your website. Let people find them. This is very, very important. Do billboards. We talked about billboards. So, the truth about advertising channels is another blog. Integration, differentiation, look around and ask questions. Do the unexpected. I can't tell you how important that is. And that's what spontaneity is. It's right doing the unexpected. And remember, in the digital world, it's nanoseconds, it's seconds. It doesn't last forever. That's why you got to keep it out there because not everybody will find it. Cross sell, always be closing. Ladies and gentlemen, listening is becoming a lost art. One of the things I'm so grateful for is your time today. This is an hour of your time and my time we'll never get back. There's only 24 hours in a day, and so I'm very grateful. And I hope you listened because I certainly love to listen to you. And even if you hear of an opportunity for another business, give it to that business. Do networking. Networking works wonders. So in summary, you stay in front of your customer, know who you are, determine your value proposition, determine your value added, and execute those tactics. Now it's time for my poem. He who has the things to sell and goes and whispers in a well is not so apt to get the dollars as he who climbs a tree and hollers. Ladies and gentlemen, in the digital world, hollering means content. Should I repeat that? Hollering is not raising your voice, it means content. Very, very important because it's not what you put in front of them. It's when you do it, how much you do it, how often you do it. Frequency matters, ladies and gentlemen. So that's it. This is the time for questions. Now, if you don't have questions, I have questions, but how much time do I have, Deb? I have a few minutes.
Yes, you have a few minutes. And there was a comment here, and it's that this topic is engaging, and I must share this with you because I thought it was pretty interesting. That your voice sounds like Better Call Saul, the actor Bob Odenkirk. So I just thought that you have a TV voice.
Wow. It could be because I was just coming off like a 20-day virus. No, I'm kidding. Thank you very much for the comment. I'd have to look up who that person is. I'm not sure who it is, but
Yeah. So I'm looking here for questions. One person was asking how to contact you.
okay. Can I put that up now, Deb? Is that all right?
Yes, of course.
Okay. So this is my contact information. So you can email me, jim@interlinegroup.com. Here's my phone number. You can call. Remember, the phone is very important. I know Deb is going to send out for evaluation, but we also have evaluations if you go to interlinegroup.com/evaluate. What I'm looking for is not just what Deb's looking for is feedback, pardon me. I'm looking for topics of interest to you. So on that /evaluate, I'm going to be asking you, what do you think we should be exploring, talking about? And I'm very interested in the audience's take on that, on some of the topics, because the topics, as Debbie mentioned, these are all business topics that I talk about. But business being business, there may be other things that I'm overlooking. So if you go there, we can send you one of our 8 guides for that too. And then also it's follow me on Twitter. We love Twitter. Twitter, as you know from watching the news, you cannot watch the news anymore without somebody quoting a tweet. When Twitter first was invented by Jack Dorsey, he based it on basically sirens. He wanted only 140 characters. Of course, he doubled that. But Twitter, in my opinion, is the mainstream in terms of communication. Used effectively, and I'm not telling you to feel one way or the other about the guys in the Oval Office, but that's a master of using social media. He uses it to great effect. And if you could put your personal feelings aside, study, ladies and gentlemen. So there's my contact information. Did we have any other questions, Deb?
Hi, Jim. I think that was the main one, how to reach you. There's been some comments, a great presentation, appreciated delivery. And of course, we appreciated that you did this for us today here at NKBA, Jim. It's been great. And again, if you want to just mention where you'll be at KBIS, maybe someone wants to look you up there. everyone
Sure.
in the audience.
Thank you so much for this opportunity, Deb, and for everyone's attention in the audience. I will be at KBIS on January 20. I'll be there all week, but January 22nd is my session at 3 o'clock. I forgot the exact room, but you can look it up in Voices of the Industry. And it's I've been there for, as Deb mentioned, for several years. They keep asking me back, so maybe they like what I say. I don't know. My topic will be on making more sense of social media, where I drill down a little bit more on social media. And one of the things that I would like to leave with them, Deb, if this is all right with you, are these three questions that I was asked by one of the major design associations. And these are important questions for you to ask. And when I put those up there, I'll leave you with those. If you want to talk about these, or I can send you what the discussion was afterwards, I'd be glad to do that. And on behalf of Interline Creative Group, again, thank you so much for your attention, for being here, for your hour of your time, and please let me know how I can help. Thank you, Deb.
Thank you so much, Jim. Thank you all for attending, and I hope you all have a great day. See you at KBIS. Thank you.